This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by MediaTek. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, May 26, 2022, and my guest is the awesome James Chen of MediaTek. Hi, James.
Hello, Miriam. How you doing? Thanks for having us today.
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic.
Awesome. So, hey, you guys announced some big news around this thing we use every day called Wi-Fi recently. I think it was Sunday. So do you want to walk us through what's happening? You know, I think a lot of folks are still on Wi-Fi 6. I think most people are. And some of us, not me, but some of us are on Wi-Fi 6E and are kind of bathing in the joy of 6 gigahertz, which is pretty awesome. So, you know, first, like, why Wi-Fi 7? And then second, what does it mean? Like, how soon can we expect to see this in production on devices? And you know, kind of walk us through a roadmap of like where we're at now, where we're going, and why Wi-Fi 7 is so important.
Okay, yeah. So I think I'll start from the top. I think to answer your question, yes, you're right. We did announce two Wi-Fi 7 products on both ends of the link this past Sunday on the 22nd. One is a Filogic 380, which is really meant for, you know, all the end consumer devices, whether it be your smartphone, your laptop, your TVs, your set-top box, or streaming stick. And then we also announced another chipset for the other end of the link, which is the Filogic 880. And that's for all your access points, whether they be in the home or enterprise, or they're sitting in the corner of your house as in a gateway or in a retail router, right? So we announced those two. Now, why is this significant? Well, for one, you know, I hear you. You know, a lot of people just upgraded to Wi-Fi 6 or 6E.
Yeah.
And they're wondering like you, hey, what's going on? You know, I just bought this great stuff. Now there's Wi-Fi 7. Well, you know, Wi-Fi as a whole industry actually is moving to a slightly quicker pace of, you know, refreshing the standard. So whereas it used to be about 5 to 6 years or so, remember that time between Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6?
Yeah, it took a while in the past, huh?
Yeah, that was what the cadence was. And those are what we call the good old days. Well, as with most things in life, it's just the sign of the times. I think Wi-Fi wants to kind of upgrade once 3 to 4 years. So that's why you see within the last, and we're in this transition period of them doing that. So that's why you see this heightened pace of all this innovation. But, you know, promise after this cycle will settle into more of this 3 years or so kind of cadence for Wi-Fi, much like the cellular world. To answer your question about what's the hubbub about, I think Wi-Fi 7 truly, in a long time, really adds capability to the Wi-Fi other than speed. Of course, you got the speed increase, and the speed increase here, Miriam, is fantastic. For the same number of antennas, let's say you got 4 antennas on your router, on a Wi-Fi 6E router that you just bought, right? And then you buy another, you know, Wi-Fi 7 router, hopefully not too long, with an equivalent number of 4 antennas, you get 2.4x the speed.
Wow.
Talking about 20%. We're talking about 2.4x. I don't know what kind of percent that is. I'll just say 2.4 times as fast. But it's not about that. It's not about, you know, the speed limit, so to speak. It's also about reducing latency. And it's all, for example, a lot of applications, gaming, this video call right now, my voice with the video, it's all about latency, as we all know. And of course, all those applications. But Wi-Fi 7 has something called MLO, multi-link operation, to really reduce that. So, and that's very momentous news because speed is great, but speed is not a cure-all for everything, as we all know. Now it's latency and reducing latency as much as we can, which is also very, very useful.
So it sounds to me from what I understood from the announcement on Sunday that MLO is really a critical key part of Wi-Fi 7. And it's similar to basically carrier aggregation for 5G or 4G, right? You're automatically dividing the stream of packets between all the different frequency bands that are available. So 2.4, 5, and 6 now. And that really gives you extra bandwidth and lower latency, obviously. And that's really the benefit, right? I mean, there's more benefits, right? I understand that. I'm just saying, like, to me, that's the one that kind of caught my eye as someone who, you know, focuses on mobile and is well versed on, all the G's, as it were. So yeah, tell us also maybe what some of the benefits are, because I know the Filogic chips, some of them you launched, allow the mesh to have its own radios with its own set of MLO to improve performance. And that's, most people don't use mesh networks with wired nodes. Like the reality is, like in enterprise, yes, but in your home, like it's just, ad hoc. You just set up one by the router or, modem, and then you set a bunch of others in your house and you hope for the best. I mean, there's software that helps you. The apps help you locate and place the devices better, right? But I feel like this is a huge advantage, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, MLO, we think is, for the lack of a better term, I was trying to look for one, but for a lack of a better term, it's basically the unsung hero of Wi-Fi 7. The speed gets all the glory, but the guy doing the real work and the real innovation is called MLO. And MLO is not just about, aggregating, as you say, taking a page out of the cellular handbook or playbook, aggregating our frequencies together to give us more speed. But also, if used correctly, it can give you more range.
Okay.
Now, I'll give you an example. We aggregate 2.4 gigahertz of low frequency in Wi-Fi with 6 gigahertz and get the best of both worlds. I mean, isn't that, having your cake and eat it too? Short and medium distances, you'll enjoy 6 gigahertz because it's got bandwidth. But as we all know, 6 gig is a little higher up in the frequency realm. It degrades a little faster. So as you get longer and longer distances, the 2.4 kind of takes over, or 5 if you want to bond or pure aggregate 5 and 6 gigahertz. So that's great. The other thing about MLO is that it reduces latency. So suppose you're doing some gaming and you're on 5 gig, you're on your Wi-Fi 6, and Wi-Fi 6 can get congested, and your access point or your router at your home that you just bought wants to move you to Wi-Fi 6E, which is 6 gigahertz.
Right.
Without Wi-Fi 7, you're going to incur a switching time, what we call, channel switching time. You switch from 5 gig to 6 gig. When the MLO is turned on, that is going to be seamless. You won't even know. In fact, you shouldn't know. All you should be really worried about and concentrating is what you're doing in front of you, right? Either you're working or you're playing. So this switching of band, low balancing, I guess is another name for it, back and forth, it's all seamless with MLO and certainly much, much improved experience. So that's some of the technology under the hood of Wi-Fi 7 that we're just so excited about. And yes, that's why we announced the Filogic 380 and 880 like we did this Sunday.
Right. And so the 880 is the big boss in terms of, like, you see that for enterprise customers, but also for, I guess, higher end consumer applications, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we get back into what we call the hybrid lifestyle, right? We certainly are here at MediaTek. So really, I think whether you're at the office or in the home, you're doing work. So your network in your home has got to be beefed up. I mean, why should all the enterprise guys get all the goodies?
Yeah.
So we're all, we're really working at home in this hybrid fashion. A lot of us are. So it really also has a lot of applicability. And I think mission critical also in the home too, not just in the office. So Wi-Fi 7 can definitely help.
So are these your first Wi-Fi 7 chips?
Yes.
Okay.
For us, and also first for the industry, really, if you look at all the features that we support.
All right. And so these are specifically for access point type devices, right?
Yes, the Filogic 880 is. The 380 is for all the clients like that.
Okay, so like if you were a laptop manufacturer and you're not, using a MediaTek chip, you want to use an Intel chip or something, you want a radio in there for Wi-Fi, you can use that chipset, right? And so tell us now, what chipsets on the mobile side have Wi-Fi 7 already, or are we going to get that soon?
We're going to get that soon. Obviously, there's no products on the store shelf, so to speak, that you can reach up and grab and experience Wi-Fi 7. And let it be known that Wi-Fi 7 certification really won't happen until probably toward the end of 2023, right? Everybody.
Oh, wow. So still a little way.
Still a little bit ways. But, history has shown that doesn't really stop, especially the consumer device manufacturers. And they will, launch, Wi-Fi products ahead of the official logo. And that will happen again for Wi-Fi 7, just as it has happened for Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 6 and 5, and so on and so forth. But we get that question a lot. And we have a really good vantage point on this because MediaTek's makes complete platform solutions for phones. Obviously, that's our Dimensity line. We also make the complete platform solution for a TV, Chromebook,
Right.
tablet. So we have the bird's eye view on this. And our answer is that by the first half of 2023, which is not really that far away, you're going to be seeing some Wi-Fi 7 based devices on the market that have Wi-Fi 7 capability. But if you're looking at the access point side for, whether it's service providers, operators, or enterprise, those probably will tend more toward the end of next year, like the second half of next year. So yes, we got a little bit ways to go, but it's not that far away. And of course, when they first appear on the store shelves, they're most likely these Wi-Fi 7 are in the premium devices.
Of course,
has shown us over time, 2 to 3 years, let's say, they'll make its way into more mainstream. So it's another upgrade cycle, but it's going to happen, and it will be here probably a little bit sooner than people anticipate.
Cool. So basically, in terms of the clients, like the phones, the laptops, whatever, we're going to start organically seeing that. People don't upgrade their phone because of Wi-Fi 7, right? They're just going to get it eventually on a phone, and they're going to be there. For the laptops, I think possibly on some of the higher end devices, you're saying 2023. And then for the infrastructure in your home or home office, since, this is a consumer podcast, we're not going to worry about what enterprise is doing. You're going to be able to buy a higher end router or access point or mesh system that has Wi-Fi 7 by, are you saying the end of 2023, early 24 then?
Yeah, I think it varies between retail. Retail typically likes to launch, products based upon the latest and greatest in Wi-Fi a lot sooner.
Right.
It can be lumped into the former category of all the clients, but certainly more of the enterprise class, or the operator class, they'd probably be toward the second half of this year.
Okay. Cool. So that's actually a pretty good roadmap for the listeners, right? Like if you just bought Wi-Fi 6E, well, you'll probably want to upgrade in a couple of years or so, right?
Yeah. Or get it for your parents. Just pass it on to someone else. That's right. I mean, who doesn't want a better network in the home these days, right? So yeah, I Wi-Fi is coming, and there'll be a lot of things to talk about. In fact, from MediaTek, we'll be rolling out more educational white papers for people really to understand, if you want, some of the underpinnings of these technology, and really showcase the end benefit. When it's all said and done, it's all about the end benefit to you and I. Actually, to my mom, would be a better. What does it really mean for her? So we'll be rolling out a lot of series of white papers and presentation really to educate the public. It's part of our outreach, as you know, and we just want people to really understand and get their hands on the technology that matters.
Right. No, that's exciting. I think, I'm still on Wi-Fi 6 here simply because I kind of saw it coming. I'm like, this is moving way faster than before. And so I'm like, okay, let's just stick with that because I really don't have any Wi-Fi 7 devices yet, other than, I have some Wi-Fi 6E phones, no laptops or maybe some tablets who have 6E, but, it doesn't really make a huge difference at this point for me. It's not critical, but I think, it's going to be critical once there's a Wi-Fi 7 critical mass. So it's good to have an idea when things are coming, as it were. So James, I have another question for you. Besides MLO, one of the things I think is a first here. I mean, it's intuitively should have been happening forever, but it's the idea that I believe the 880, right, has an entire set of radios dedicated to mesh networking, essentially, right?
Absolutely. So that's one of the things about the Filogic 880 that we think that we do a much better job of versus our competitors, that we recognize the need for better networking in the home, whether you call that mesh or repeaters or extenders, that doesn't really matter. But essentially the idea is to use dedicated radios to link up all the devices in your home between your gateway and all your repeaters or mesh node, dedicated radios. So it's like using Wi-Fi as a wireline replacement, right? Replacing all the gigabit Ethernet stuff that you want to do, right? So we have that technology So we can dedicate up to two 4x4 radios for what we call the wireless backhaul. So, all the wireless traffic between your gateway and mesh will be now separated from the what we call the front haul, which is all that traffic to all those, fancy and glorious smartphones and end devices that we.
Yeah. To me, I'm surprised that hasn't already happened. Like, obviously it would have been a technical challenge because I think this is something that you folks are doing. I think MLO is really helping you do this, a dedicated backhaul, right? But I feel like I'm surprised nobody's really done this before. Like not necessarily like you did it in one chip, which I think is the big advantage here. You're simplifying the process for router and AP manufacturers, right? But I think that I'm surprised that we haven't seen somebody just put two of the old Wi-Fi 6E chips and just do like something crazy like that. Maybe we have, maybe I don't know. But it seems to me like a no-brainer that if you have a mesh network in a consumer environment where they're not going to have wired nodes, that you would just automatically dedicate some sort of backhaul, network, right? As it were.
Yeah, I think the invention of really MLO really helps because it is really, I think what makes it all possible. Yes, you could have dedicated radios and Wi-Fi 6 to do this, but without MLO, your backhaul is not going to be as stable.
Right, because you have to pick a frequency and then you can't hop, you can't optimize. If 6 gigahertz get blocked out for a minute because of some interference, you now have to like switch, right? Well, you have to maybe switch smartly, but then you have an interruption potentially in the stream. So if you're gaming or something, you're SOL at that point,
And also, I think power is a concern.
I was going to say, power management, is it different with Wi-Fi 7? Are we more efficient yet again?
I think, with all the things we put into Wi-Fi, over the years, the process node, and of course, this has come into limelight because of the COVID and all the supply shortages. But our Filogic 380 and 880 especially, they're all on 6 nanometer. I mean, it is, and previously, Wi-Fi chips were not on 6 nanometer. So having a dedicated radio for a backhaul really was kind of power prohibitive. But hopefully with 6 nanometer, we've solved that conundrum as well. So a lot of things have to come together. MLO, 6 nanometer, the right chip, obviously from the right chipset vendor. They all have to come together, and that's how it precipitates all this.
I wonder who that would be.
Yeah, I wonder too.
Yeah, no, I think this is exciting. It's hard for me to usually get excited about Wi-Fi because it's kind of fabric, right? It's there. You just have it, you use it, it works, it gives you something. But I think we take it for granted. I think people are just like so blasé about it. And I feel like they shouldn't be. Like, this is another critical tech. Like 5G is nice to have on obviously a mobile device. But at the same time, if you don't have a solid Wi-Fi setup, whether it be on the client or on the AP router side, there are many situations where you're just not going to get the kind of performance you expect. And I think, I'm happy to see that, we're moving forward and it seems to be going faster. As you said, in the past, I remember it to take like years to get to whatever it was next to Wi-Fi. And now we're like, I kind of remember 6 and then 6E just kind of came out of nowhere. And then it makes sense though, because we needed less traffic, right? Less busy frequencies to work with. But then 7, like I did not expect that for like 2025 or something.
Right. And I think 7 really, for maybe it was fortuitous, but it really came in when, like we said earlier, when home networks need to be beefed up for all this hybrid working.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's all good. The timing is good. Maybe we'll, exit out the current phase. I don't know what word to use now. And 7 will just, make the transition a little bit easier with its abilities. But regardless of what it is, I think Wi-Fi 7 has really some impressive stuff in it. It's not just a speed upgrade. So like we've been discussing.
Well, there you go, folks. You have it from the horse's mouth. From MediaTek themselves, Wi-Fi 7, it matters. Well, listen, James, we should probably wrap up. I think our time's up, but thanks again for being on the show and touching on all things Wi-Fi 7 with us, giving us an idea of what matters and what the timeline looks like. I really appreciate you being back on the show.
Thank you for having us again.
Awesome. So that was some interesting Wi-Fi 7 stuff, but now let's talk news and other mobile goodness with Adam Dowd. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Hello, Miriam. I am well. Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun.
Yes, I'm excited. I was on your show 2 weeks ago or something?
Yeah,
It's
a couple
like
weeks. Yeah,
we're trading places.
we are.
So you saw the topics. This relatively quiet news week.
It has.
I mean, It's always the calm before the storm. I always worry when I have a quiet news week. But anyway, for me, the big thing that stood out, and I want you to tell me what your thoughts are, is the whole Xiaomi and Leica partnership that was officially announced.
Right.
Wow, right?
So I mean, it kind of depends. So it depends on what the nature of this relationship is going to be. We've seen camera companies and phone companies, getting together and hooking up, as it were, in the past, and it just kind of depends on like it seems like Leica's partnerships have gone traditionally better than some of the other ones, like the OnePlus Hasselblad relationship.
Oh boy!
But
did you have to open that can of worms?
I mean, we talked about that on my podcast a little bit, even though we were there to talk about like a totally different phone. But anyway, that's how we roll. So I'm curious to see like what the nature of this relationship it is, like whether it's going to be like a air quotes tuning, or whether it's going to be something like they're actually going to bring their engineers in to design the glass. It's going to depend on like what the nature of the relationship is, but it's a great partnership because cameras are such a focus in today's smartphones.
100%. For those of you watching the show on Patreon right now, for those of you who subscribe to the video version, the air quotes part and the eye roll that went with it, Adam, was like epic. Just want you to know, yes, folks, in case you don't know, because I always mention it usually at the end of the show, but there is a Patreon, and if you want to support me, you can go there. But one of the perks is that you get the video version of the podcast exclusively for patrons, and you get it like a day or so earlier. So
with my swanky new background too.
I know you've all set up. I'm all like still doing the blurry green screen thing. But anyway, my take on this is kind of like yours. I feel like it really depends on what the nature of the relationship. But for me, I was like, the reason I'm excited is because until now, Leica and Huawei had an exclusive partnership. Exclusive. Now, the last Huawei phone I got, the P50 Pro, does still have Leica camera stuff on it. And it's really good. Like it's continuing in the footsteps of the legendary Huawei Leica partnership. So to me, that tells me, you can go branch off into a bunch of directions here. The number one you can do is like, they're going to end their partnership with Huawei since Huawei is no longer really that relevant, even in Asia. That's kind of the negative view. The positive view is, cool. Now, their exclusivity is done with Huawei, so they can also do Xiaomi. And then, there's kind of intermediate steps where it's like, well, I wonder if it's going to be equivalent or not to what they have with Huawei, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if it's not the same quality of relationship, it's going to be very superficial, aka Hasselblad and OnePlus. My point is, I have high hopes because, Xiaomi has been doing some incredible cameras in the last couple of years. And particularly last year's Mi 11 Ultra was eye-bleedingly good. Like, I don't think it needed the Leica brand on it, but it pretty much it was up there with the best of the best. And I think this will just reinforce that, I feel, by adding, some of that Leica color science. And, the thing you have to know about the Huawei Leica relationship, I actually flew out to Leica's headquarters in Germany on Huawei's dime years ago before the whole ban of the Huawei thing. And I got to visit with engineers there from both Leica and Huawei about what specifically they're doing. And it was way more than just color tuning and algorithms. In fact, most of the computational stuff was coming from Huawei, and most of the physical stuff, like the lenses, the way they were tuned and hardware at manufacturing time, was all based on Leica's spec. Now, Leica wasn't manufacturing for them. That was done mass manufacturing in China on spec. But Leica was speccing out the lenses, and Sony was speccing out custom sensors for Huawei to work with Leica's lenses. That's why we have seen sensors on Huawei phones that don't exist on any other phone, is because they're freaking bespoke, spec'd by freaking Leica, guys. So that's a huge deal to me. And if Xiaomi can access this, the same level of collaboration, holy crapola, because, I'm sorry to say, but the chance of Huawei coming back as a phone manufacturer anytime soon is low. And Xiaomi is, it's really out there. They're doing so much good stuff. Even if their $250 phones have decent camera systems these days. So that's my excitement. That's why I'm like, okay, so there's all this gray here. I hope it's not just a branding exercise. I hope it's not just, we tuned the color or whatever. I have to give BBK Group some credit, though. And maybe you won't agree, but I feel like the Oppo Find X5 Pro with the Hasselblad partnership is outputting some of the best BBK Group photography I've ever seen. And Oppo in general, before they even had the Hasselblad partnership, like their previous Find X3 Pro, for example, their color science has been on point for a while, in the same way as Xiaomi has been doing great things. So I think that Hasselblad partnership, I think, is maybe blooming a little bit. And I feel like we're getting to see some of that on the OnePlus 10 Pro versus, the OnePlus 9 Pro, which was now has been updated as better, but initially was like, wah, 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 sad trombone of doom.
Right. And actually, to build upon that BBK thing, while I was still at Digital Trends, Andy Boxall did a comparison of this is just a side note. Throw a link in the show notes. We won't get too far into it.
Yeah, no, I like it.
He did a comparison between the OnePlus 8 Pro, the OnePlus 9 Pro, and the OnePlus 10 Pro.
Wow.
Because that he had pre-Hasselblad, first gen Hasselblad, second gen Hasselblad, and did a comparison for all three of them. So I will send you a link that you can include in the show notes, because I think that would add a lot of it adds a lot of color. No pun intended. It adds a lot of color to the conversation about camera manufacturers working with phone manufacturers and what the effects can actually be.
Exactly. And, Andy is a great mobile photographer. I've known him for a long time. He's been on the show. We're going to have him on soon. He's actually on my list coming up. So,
cool.
Yeah. So I will definitely put that link in, because anything that Andy writes regarding pretty much anything, but particularly imaging, is always on point. So,
right.
There are some folks out there. Steve Litchfield is another one in the UK,
Yeah, absolutely.
etc. So, the point is, there are some camera phone gurus out there beyond, I suppose, myself. I mean, I don't like the word guru, but I do like to think of myself as a bit of a mobile photography expert. Somehow I've managed to earn that badge. But hey, the other thing that's exciting about this is that we're already seeing leaks of a Xiaomi 12S and Xiaomi 12S Pro that are clearly Leica branded. So I think this is happening way sooner than we think at this point, which is exciting, and why not? I think that as much as some people roll their eyes, rightfully so, about the branding part of these partnerships, I do think some of them have some value. And Leica has, as you said, been the best so far, the most relevant. And I do think the Hasselblad one is building up. I think that what Vivo is doing with Zeiss and Sony are doing with Zeiss is also nothing to joke about. I think that their lenses are spot on. And I also think Zeiss is speccing the sensors to go with that, even though Vivo is actually using non-bespoke, but off-the-shelf sensors from Sony and from Samsung. But they're saying, for this lens, we think you should do this. And I've got a Vivo X80 Pro coming in, folks. I've had every Vivo X series, and those are, again, up there with some of the best camera phones I've ever reviewed. And we all know that the X80 Pro so far has been incredibly well received as an imaging phone. So I cannot wait. It's coming, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, folks. So yeah, I mean, what do you think? Who, like, in an ideal scenario world, who do you think are like good partnership examples that you would like to see that don't exist yet?
Oh God,
like for me, Fuji. Like, I want to see somebody do something with Fuji.
Yeah, I'm not as much as of a camera nerd as some. I would love to see. I would love to see Samsung partner up with an optics company, just because Samsung already does a really good job with the optics, and so I think, like with Xiaomi and the Leica deal, if they could just push it, just make it fine tune it just a little bit more to make it just a little bit, and if they could do something about the oversaturation, that'd be great too. But if they could just make it a little better, that would be very sweet for me. But Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. I wouldn't mind seeing Motorola just start to care about cameras at all.
Dude, you segued before I was segueing. I love it. Okay, listen, this is great. This is why we're both kind of pro podcasters. I have so much to say about that. So we have a couple of Moto topics coming up, folks. That's the segue. Thank you, Adam. But I actually want to kind of segue inside the segue.
Okay.
Inception segue. So watch out. This is gonna be hardcore.
Segception.
Yeah, watch out. So here's the thing, right? I have the Moto G Stylus 5G for 2022. Okay, and I finally was like reluctantly, eye-rollingly unboxed it and took it in my pocket with me for a few days to take some photos. Because here's the thing. There are two angles to this. Angle one is that 50 megapixel sensor, which I think is an OmniVision or a Samsung with, I believe, 0.64 microns, is kind of crappy, at least on the Moto Gs so far. And I'm not sure it's the same 50 megapixel sensor on this G Stylus 5G, but I assumed it was. And then I found out that phone has OIS. So I was like, wait a minute. Okay, now maybe that explains the stupid, ridiculous $500 price point, but it doesn't. Actually, it's still overpriced. But they did at least put OIS on it. So I was like, wait, maybe it's not the same 50 megapixel sensor. Maybe they're getting a little more serious because as we mentioned, I think on your show recently, I feel like Moto is like the bad baseline of mobile photography. Like, if you beat Moto, you're at the worst tier. If you're below Moto, you're hopeless. If you are on par with Moto, at least at the G level, you're not doing so well. So I was hoping that maybe this G Stylus 5G, based on its excessive price overall and the fact that it had OIS spec on the lens, was going to be like, okay, maybe that balances out. And you know what? Initially, I was like, oh, nice, not too bad. And then I made the mistake to look closer.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that.
Social
media good. Social media good.
No, I'm
That's
talking
all
like,
you got to do.
You didn't have to look very close. Like it was a wow. So the point is, okay, it's better than the 50 megapixel G series phones before it because it does have OIS and it does work. You can shake it and you can see it's doing its thing. And in low light, I have to say it pays off a little bit. But it's not so much that. It's the overall image processing that Moto always falls flat on. Like the literally white bands around like a hill edge between the sky and the hill. If you zoom in 2 to 3x, you can see the white line from the over sharpening.
That's no bueno.
It's like, what are you doing? Like, you know, power lines, you literally see the line and then a white line above it. Like, I'm like, how did they even leave the lab tuned like that?
It's like, is there a filter or something? Like we did hashtag no filter on those?
You know, I have like some of these Infinix phones that are sold in Africa that cost $200 that have better imaging than that.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's just,
I mean, like, it's abysmal. Anyway, the point is that this segues us obviously into imaging and Moto combined, which is these ongoing rumors of this Moto Frontier, right? So you're in Chicagoland.
I am.
And I want you as a big fan. I think we're all big fans of Moto. Like, I want to say, even though I'm banging on the Moto head of, you know, mediocre photography, it's mostly because I want to rally them into doing a better job. I'm a big fan.
We criticize because we care.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan overall of a lot of the other things they do. Like, their software is so good, so good. Every time I use a Moto phone, it's just like, oh yeah. It feels like being home again. So you're in Chicagoland, you're on their turf. You have a closer connection, I think, to Moto than me in some ways. And I want you to tell me what your thoughts are on this Frontier. And also more as a meta conversation, can they get out of this camera funk? I want them to.
Yeah, I absolutely do want them to as well. But Motorola, I mean, God, going back as far as like the Moto X, Motorola has never had good cameras. And it's just one of those, like the software is so good. There's so much about the software optimization that Motorola does right, but for some reason they just cannot get, you know, maybe it's the color science, maybe it's the optics, maybe it's the glass, I don't know, but it seems like Motorola, kind of like the Cubs before 2016, they found new ways to fail. Like with every generation of camera, for some reason, you're putting, because Motorola started off with lower resolution sensors. They would stick with they were kind of like Apple in that they stuck with 12 megapixel sensors for the longest time. And, you're just like, well, okay, that's good. You can do that as long as you're using it correctly, and Motorola never did. And then last couple of years, they started upping the ante in terms of like resolution to 48 megapixels, 50 megapixels, yada yada yada. And especially with the Moto Edge. I forget the branding because it's the US branding. The Moto Edge, the flagship
Edge
that
Plus,
just came out.
Edge, that's what we have in the US.
Edge 2, Edge Plus, whatever. Because if I remember correctly, they had a 50 megapixel main camera and a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera, which is great because a lot of the times when you have to choose between a main camera and an ultra wide sensor, you're trading the ultra wide for a major loss of resolution. So sometimes the software is good enough to compensate for that, but more often than not, in my tests anyway, I have found that the resolution just falls off a cliff when you switch from, say, I'm just going to throw out some numbers, a 48 megapixel main sensor to an 8 megapixel ultra wide sensor, which seemed to be a standard setup there for a while.
Oh,
so
for sure.
I was so sick really
of that.
excited.
I'm so glad that some manufacturers like Xiaomi and OnePlus, at least for a while, although they, their current 50 megapixel is that really crappy Samsung one on there, because it gives them the ability, because it's a small sensor, to do a wider lens, right? So the
150, yeah.
But the Oppo Find X5 Pro is a good example, or the 3 Pro for that matter, the Find X3 Pro. It's the 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 on the ultra wide is the same as the main sensor. So I want to see more of that. But sorry to interrupt. You were saying that you're sick and tired of the 8 megapixel ultra wides. So am I.
Yeah, went off on a little tangent there. Sorry about that. So getting back to Motorola, I would really like to see, and this, the story that you're referencing here, obviously, is that the Frontier is going to come out with this 200 megapixel sensor, and it's been said so many times that cameras are much more than the megapixels, or the megapixels, as a friend of the show calls them.
Now I haven't had lunch yet. Like, what are you doing to me?
I know, right? I just finished lunch, so neener. Anyway,
time zones.
# time zones. So I'm hoping that the Frontier will do a decent job. Like at some point, when you stuff as many megapixels into a camera sensor as you can, it's kind of like eventually you have to just cross that threshold. You have to force it over the finish line. Like, okay, this has to be good enough now, right? We'll see, because, as you've pointed out several times already, Motorola's color science leaves something to be desired, and that you can have all the megapixels you want. If you can't process the image, it's not going to matter.
It's not just the color science, it's just the way they process entirely the image, like
exactly.
Sharpening, a bunch of other. For me, what stands out here is, again, the same thing as with this Moto G Stylus 5G, where it's like, 50 megapixel, that hasn't been so good so far on a G series. But hey, OIS, maybe this is a better thing. Here I'm looking at two things, right? 200 megapixels. Are you kidding me? Who needs that, right? Like, but then again, you can pixel bin now. Maybe like instead of 9:1, you can do 16:1 pixel bin,
or something.
Right?
Yeah,
that's like 4 down. So instead of going like from 108 to 12, you're going from 200 to 10, so like or 50 something, or 20 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The point is it's got some potential. However, I'm not convinced that's needed. But at the same time, this is the counterpoint is Samsung making it? And Samsung has delivered some incredibly good 108 megapixel sensors to the point now where they're making cheaper ones that are being used on the more budget phones by Xiaomi and others. And those sensors are fantastic, and they still deliver really good performance. So, the also other thing, then on the negative again, I'm like, well, but their first gen sensors at Samsung are always a little wonky because they need some tuning. So like, to me, this is like definitely a marketing ploy. Like, I think Moto, this is clearly, we can be the first with 200 megapixel, and it's just not going to deliver other than look good on the headlines. But I want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Of course.
Benefit of the doubt.
You betcha.
Yeah, we go quoting your podcast name. But I'm going to give them the benefit because I want them to potentially, might be the turnaround for them, might be the point where they finally get the help they need to get the software processing properly done. And, Samsung is definitely a pretty solid sensor maker. They've come a long way. They used to kind of be my kind of like, oh man, a Samsung sensor. But now it's like, oh, okay, some of the higher end ones are pretty great. It's still Sony though. Still Sony just beats everyone. Like Sony makes the best sensors. Still, I don't know what it is. Like, how is it that a company can be so far ahead from everyone else? I suppose it's because they make so many of the sensors used on I hate the word real cameras.
Human cameras.
Right?
Yeah, people cameras.
Not just their own Sony Alpha line, but I'm talking about like almost everyone else at this point. I think other than Nikon and Canon who make their own sensors, it's pretty much like, I think Fuji might still maybe making, I don't know. I think they might be using Sony sensors. Anyway, the point is, what I'm trying to say. Look, Moto Frontier should be interesting, right? I don't know if I'm going to be too excited about this 200 megapixel. And it's also, at this point, I bet you it's going to be China only at first, right?
Almost certainly. And maybe if we can continue the Cubs metaphor just a little bit farther, maybe this 200 megapixel sensor is the Dexter Fowler of camera sensors, because Dexter Fowler was the leadoff man for the Cubs 2016 team that arguably led them to the World Series.
I have no idea what you just said.
I didn't think you would, and I don't think any of your listeners will, but trust me, it's a great metaphor for the three people that understood it.
I trust you. All I heard was sports ball, blah, 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 sports ball, blah.
World Series, right.
And, it's baseball, right? Is that what you're talking about?
It is baseball,
so
it is.
I will at least acknowledge that baseball is pretty cool. I don't understand anything about sports, but if I have to watch it and kind of go like, okay, let's sit down with some popcorn, I have to say that baseball has been pretty good.
Yeah.
Hockey, as a Canadian, is still my go-to because it's so,
of course.
Half the time I don't even know where the puck is.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's like voodoo magic sport. And then baseball is much more chill. And then football, I don't like so much. I really have no idea. Basketball, man, I never got into it. I don't know. There's all kinds of sports ball out there. I guess hockey is different because it's sport puck. It's not sport ball.
So, pro tip for future podcast guests, if you wanted to derail the podcast, start talking about sports. All right, moving on.
We didn't derail anything. Adam, you have the leeway. You're a Chicago person. The Cubs are a team from Chicago, yes?
Damn right.
See, I know a little bit. Okay, done. Let's move on to the other motor news, which I think is kind of related in a way, because this first story tells us that there is a third-gen Razr coming and might be launching in China in July. And then we're getting another post. I'll put all these things in the show notes, folks. GSM Arena showed a leak of the Razr 3, and it's exactly what you think it is. It has the same kind of front display as before, but a dual camera in the front. Finally, we're going to get, I guess, an ultra wide. But, it's like they're lagging behind the kind of like the Z Flip original even at this point, which is 2 years old?
Yeah, I'm excited about this one, though. I really am. Especially the design of this new Razr. They got, Motorola's getting rid of the chin, which I understand is iconic, air quotes, from a nostalgic standpoint, but it didn't really serve any purpose other than to say, hey, look at this chin. But the inside of this looks very much like a Moto Z Flip clone, but on the outside it seems to have a massive outside screen, which I am very excited about. It's just kind of like Motorola saying, you know what, okay, we were wrong, that's okay, we're learning from our mistakes, here you go, let's try this.
I think the biggest challenge with the Moto Razr, that form factor wise, there's many challenges. I like that phone a lot. I really appreciate that, especially the 5G. Once they fixed a few things, it was a lot better. But I feel like it's that chin, because you need to swipe from the bottom, right? Like, that's the challenge. Right. Like, you can't really do that. And gestures are a real thing on Android now. Back in the days when they did the chin, it was still kind of like, you could argue that, for me, I have this rule that every phone I'm using that's Android 11 or less, I'm using with the buttons, and every phone that's 12 or more, I'm using with the swipe gestures. I finally adopted the swipe with my Pixel 6 Pro with Android 12.
You were a holdout. All
oh,
right.
I was against it for the longest time, mostly because there was a lack of consistency in the experience. Now, I think around Android 10, it got universal, but I was holding back because I was just like, get off my lawn, you kids. And then I did it, and I have to say now, I wish it was like that for even the old Android phones I come across. It's so nice. But, I still think for early adopters, it's a tough one. Like, people don't have the dexterity. They don't have the, like, I don't understand how to like explain this to people like my audience and you, Adam, who are tech savvy early adopters, have every phone in their hands. Mm-hmm. But you look at the world out there, you look at people using their phones in line at the store, and they are fumbling. Even with their iPhones, they have a really hard time. You barely ever see them even switch apps. You just see them go back to the home screen.
And then go and then open up the next app. Yeah.
Right. And then if you look on an Android user, you need the back button. You need it. On iPhone, you can get away without having the back gesture. Most apps have a little back icon somewhere in the app.
They have to, yeah.
But on an Android phone, if you don't know, if you don't have the dexterity or you do it, and it takes some practice. Like I'm still having issues with my gestures on my Pixel because sometimes I'm like, the timing is a little off and I get a little frustrated with it. Another thing that I have to say I don't like the gestures for is when I'm editing photos in Google Photos, right? And I want to swipe across the bottom part where all the different filters are, the different adjustments are, right? And I swipe from the edge and I go back, and then thankfully it pops a dialog saying, "Are you sure you want to cancel this edit?" And I'm like, "No, idiot. Right. I was trying to get from contrast down to warmth. Adjustment." And so, there are some things that gestures make it a little more challenging, but
yeah, definitely.
I feel like it's still a thing now. I think it's still the standard now. And that's why this Moto without a chin, I think makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And didn't Android 13 introduce some new refinements to the back gesture to try to assuage that issue? I totally understand where you're coming from. And I have a number of apps that I use myself where I accidentally back gesture instead of like swiping from photo to photo or whatever. So, but I want to say, if I remember correctly, I've never installed an Android beta. I never probably will.
Neither do I.
But from what I remember, I thought Android 13 was trying to remediate that in some way. I don't recall exactly how, but fingers crossed, maybe Google can get that refined. I would love to have a back gesture on an iPhone because I've been using Android gestures since the Pixel 4a. So wow. I'm not that much far ahead of you, honestly.
Still, that's like 2 years on me.
That's true. But when I was reviewing the Pixel 4a, I'm like, okay, Google, shoot, sorry. I didn't mean to set off everybody's Google. Sorry about that. I'm using your phone. I'm going to use your gestures, and that's kind of how I got started with it. And when I switch over to iPhone, because I typically use an Android phone for 6 months and an iPhone for 6 months. When I switch over to iPhone, I miss that back gesture so much. I really would. It's like my third on my list for things that I want iPhone to adopt from Android. The first being a number row and not crappy notifications.
Yeah, for sure. So, let's see how it goes. I hope that they can price it right. And that, and that's the problem with Moto lately, pricing. Like, again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I know that nobody buys Moto phones full price unlocked, that they get the deal through their carrier or whatever. And there's always a Verizon version or something with millimeter wave. And then the price is reasonable and you get an installment plan. But I don't understand why they don't upfront price the unlocked versions competitively for the few people who will buy it unlocked, and instead of like make us roll our eyes and laugh hysterically. I literally have done this at a press briefing before. Like I couldn't hold it back. I'm like, are you joking? This phone is $400. Like it's the same with this Moto G Stylus 5G. I think overall it's a good package, but
it just costs too much.
In terms of spec, but it basically is a OnePlus Nord N20 5G with a stylus and OIS on the camera. And that phone cost, $282. And they're selling theirs for $500. Now, it does have a bit more storage, granted. It does have OIS on that camera, but the imaging sucks because of the algorithm. So it's a wash. So I'm like, how do you even justify that when 500 can buy me a Pixel 5a right now?
Did you see the comment in this story? It says, now if there's a budget version of this around 200 to 250 euro, then I would buy it.
Good luck with
that. Yeah, that's never going to happen.
And speaking of phones in the $500 price point, I'm going to segue us into the Nothing Phone 1.
Yes.
We now have rumors of a launch date and rumors of a price. The price doesn't surprise me at all. 500 euros or 500 pounds or whatever it was, euros.
Yeah.
And that's about $500 US, give or take. And the rumor is July 21. And, honestly, I think all this time I've always known this is going to be a mid-ranger. I bet you it's going to have that new Snapdragon chip that's recently come out, the 7 Gen 1. That's my gut feeling.
Oh, okay. You think they're going to go 7 on that one?
Well,
okay.
I mean, 500 euros is a lot of money. This better be a premium mid-ranger or an entry-level flagship.
Well, I don't know.
Remember, this is Europe, where you can buy Xiaomi, where you can buy Realme, where you can buy Oppo, where you can buy Vivo, right?
Well,
so it's very competitive.
And July 21st is the launch date for the Pixel 6a as well. So
there you go. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Too.
And so I feel like they, the transparent, the design is going to be really cool for sure. But don't expect this to be a 1+1, completely undercutting the universe. I think Carl is smarter than that. I think he understands that he has to be competitive. And that's why I think we're going to see a chip like that. We're not going to see a flagship chip. We're going to the next level down because he's not going to want to cut too many corners. And it's not mentioned in this story, but there is also strong rumors of wireless charging.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense since the Buds have it too. So yeah, I mean, this is honestly, I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little annoyed as usual with Carl and about the marketing overload and he's really reaching far out in these weird corners of his mind, I think here.
Well, it's working because we're talking about it.
Yeah, I say let's go with it because you know what? I think he's a brilliant guy and I have a lot of respect for what he's done at OnePlus, and I think he was really trying to take the Nord in a direction that was awesome for everyone. And I think that's kind of died off except for the actual true Nord, like the Nord 2 now, Nord 2T.
Right.
The other ones, and the N series in North America and the C series are, sorry for making noises, but that's basically the only analogy I can make about them.
No, I totally get it.
What do you think is going to be happening with this phone? Like, what's your take?
Well, you bring up a good point. When you brought up the OnePlus One and how the OnePlus One basically undercut everybody else in the field with some premium specs. The flagship killer basically, and the big difference between OnePlus and Nothing is that Nothing doesn't have the BBK cash flow money bags flowing towards it to keep it afloat for the first few years.
No, they're going to get acquired. It's like Nextbit got bought by Razer. It's like, I think that's kind of the angle. Essential eventually got acquired, because that was a shit show.
Okay.
That's kind of the positioning here. I don't think, first of all, I think he has the relationships in China to make this solid in terms of manufacturing, distribution, and all that. He's got all that. But I think in addition, he's kind of like, let's see if we can wow the world enough that somebody will come along and say, we are buying you off in a year.
Here's a bag full of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I could see, I have been less than impressed with what Nothing has offered thus far. Although I haven't actually used the Nothing earbuds, which my co-producer on my show, Cliff, he loves his. So
they're really great.
They did a solid job with that. I'm expecting, like you said, kind of like a mid-range phone. I just don't. I installed the Nothing launcher for about a day and a half, and I just didn't understand the point of it, so I just kind of moved on from it. If there is some type of sweet integration built into the phone, then maybe this is going to be good. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a very well designed, possibly a little fun to use mid-range phone. I'm not sure if that's enough.
No,
honestly.
And I think it has the potential to becoming an iconic design if it's done right. I'm not sure the software, other than the weird, launcher is going to be anything special. Most of us are probably going to put Nova on there or something if it's too annoying, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like it's the hardware that we're coming for the hardware. And
I think so
hopefully
too.
he won't mess that up. And I don't think he will. Based on the buds, I don't think he will. And, is it more than that? I don't know. Should you buy it? It's too early to tell. I think that Carl might be smart enough to come up with a relationship with a U.S. carrier at the same time as he does a launch in the U.K. If
really?
He does, because he was very strongly influential in the relationship with T-Mobile, with OnePlus. Okay. He understands that the kind of whimsical, potentially iconic in the future designs are all tied in to adoption in the wealthiest markets. Europe, he's got it covered, but they've already announced partnerships, I believe, with some of the European carriers. And so
they did. Yeah.
Right. So why wouldn't they, maybe not at launch, but soon thereafter say, hey, we T-Mobile's got us, right? And T-Mobile is obviously the perfect partner, right? Like we know that. So I'm staying very optimistic, mostly because I want to see some exciting hardware. And I'm not talking about spec exciting. I'm talking about, let's get something different in our hands, right?
Fun to use, fun to show off.
But not compromised, right? That the specs are solid, the value is there, and there's a design element. Because, remember, folks, you can laugh all you want about the design of the Nothing Ear One earbuds, but they are really good earbuds. Yeah. They have wireless charging, they have active noise canceling, and they cost $99. Yeah, so they hit all the good things. Good sound quality, they have all the specs, and they cost $99. And cool design, number 4, right? So if this phone has good specs, and delivers a good experience overall, has good design, and is value priced or priced at a point where I think it's worth it, why not? Why not? He has a chance. He has a clout, right? So let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And can we, side note, I'm just curious how you feel about this. How important is wireless charging in a set of earbuds to you?
It's not, but it's a must-have if you want to be competitive. I feel like it's nice to just throw them on a pad. If you're in your car or whatever, and you realize, oh crap, I'm gonna be heading on the train or whatever, or the plane for a bit, and I realize I didn't charge my earbuds, I can just throw them on my Qi charger on my car. It's just nice to have. It's not a necessary thing. Like ANC is a must-have.
Yeah,
wireless charging is nice to have. Whereas I feel like wireless charging on a phone for me is a must-have.
I'm just curious because my favorite pair of buds right now does not have wireless charging, and Cliff will not let that go because
which ones?
They're the Technics. They have a stupid alphabet soup name, but it's like the EAHAK60. 60 is in there somewhere.
They're pretty great. I've only had a chance to listen to them once. I don't actually have a pair. But you know what? Look, earbuds are very much a matter of personal preference. Mostly take them for a listen. And here's the thing. My advice to people who want to buy earbuds is don't focus on the brand names. There are some really good earbuds from no-name brands or from lesser brands. Like, TCL makes some of the best freaking earbuds you can buy today.
They do. They make some good
ones.
They're
amazing. And TCL, you're going to say, well, it's a TV brand. It's relatively well known. They're second tier brand in the US still, right? Like, that's my point. Now, they're also not a complete stranger out of Amazon brand, which is a nice bonus. You get warranty, you get support, right? Mm-hmm. So my point is that I would look at those. I wouldn't look at Apple, Samsung, and the big players, because they're going to be too expensive. And BBK groups make so many different buds for all their different brands.
Right.
And here's the thing. They all sound slightly different. They're not all the same. Unlike their phones, which tend to have like a design language that is unified, these are all over the map. So if you find one that the sound works for you, the price is right, the fit is good, and it's got the features you want, be it ANC or wireless charging or whatever it might be, long battery life, just get them, but don't restrict yourself on these branded Samsung, Apple, whatever they might be. Like Nothing, you probably don't know that brand. Most people don't, and they're great. So, OnePlus for me is hit and miss. Like all of BBK Group when it comes to earbuds. The OnePlus Nord Buds were awesome for the money, I thought. So speaking of BBK Group, One of my favorite phones right now from all of BBK Group, if I look in their portfolio, which is massive, is the Realme GT Neo 3, the 150 watt version that charges at 150 watt, has a Dimensity 8100 in it, has a Sony IMX766 with OIS as the main sensor.
Nice.
Now, the only thing that phone is missing for me to be like, is wireless charging and, of course, a metal frame because I'm a bit of a picky, person when it comes to. I like my phones to be metal and glass. I know that if Google can make a metal and I guess it's plastic back on the 6A, but metal frame. I want a metal frame and I want a glass back. I don't care how much it costs. Do it.
Understood.
If TCL can do it with a TCL 20 series at $450, I don't see why anybody else can't. So this Realme is a delight. It's one of the kind of like sleeper hits of the mid-range right now. Now, of course, in the US doesn't have 5G that works here, whatever. This is great for folks listening abroad. If you're in India, in Europe, in Asia overall, check out that phone because you're getting a ton of, it's $350. And I just gave you the specs. Oh, and of course you get 120 hertz AMOLED or 90 hertz, whatever it is, like a high refresh rate, 1080p AMOLED, gorgeous, bright, whatever.
Yep.
They now have a limited edition, which is going to cost, I don't know how much, but it's going to be pretty amazing. The Realme limited edition phones are unicorns. They're very rare. I have one. It arrived yesterday. I'm going to unbox it. This is the Naruto edition. From the anime Naruto manga. It's incredible. It's mostly the packaging on these is insane. They use like these capsules, as you can see in that article, that little red cylinder there. That's the packaging for it.
Oh, I thought that was like a water bottle.
No, that's the packaging for it.
That's neat.
And then you can see the unboxing below there, and you can see that the custom earbuds, custom like freaking charger even is color coordinated, and the back of the phone has got that like red dot. That red dot is not a fingerprint sensor. That is just the little logo for the
That's a missed opportunity.
I mean, and look, actually, if you can buy it because it's only available in China right now and it's really limited edition, it's $415. So it's only 70, 65, whatever it is, dollars over the regular model. And it comes with the 12 gigs and the 256. So,
but this thing looks
regular
so
model
good.
Doesn't have it.
Like I am digging this real hardcore. I don't know what Naruto is. I don't know who it is.
I'm not well versed on it either, but I'm supporting it because it's just so cool. And Realme keeps making these cool limited edition phones.
This orange, black, and silver. Oh man, it is so freaking sweet. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I've said this before. I'm saying it again. Realme is the new OnePlus. Absolutely 100%. They are making, first of all, they're part of BBK Group. They're undercutting everyone else in BBK Group with the features and the value. And they are just they are really bringing that kind of like never settle / flagship killer vibe that we had, that we loved. And I think that's also why OnePlus is going a different direction, because Realme is becoming the OnePlus brand for the BBK Group. Whereas OnePlus is kind of becoming like a second Oppo, right? An Oppo for the markets that don't have the Oppo brand.
The American
the
Oppo.
US, for example. Well, but they also sell them in India and in Asia too. China has a lot of OnePlus phones, believe it or not, even though they have the choice of Oppo and Vivo and Realme. So I don't know. It's interesting. But I just wanted to mention it for those of you who are manga / anime fans out there. There's a Naruto edition. If you want a really solid phone and you can get this phone imported from China and have something really unique, the price is right, the specs are right. This is really cool. Get it.
And also consider this is $415, which you said was like $75 more than the standard version. If this comes with a set of wireless earbuds as well,
I think it comes with a power bank, but not the wireless earbuds. But here's the good news. Realme makes some wireless earbuds that's $50 or less that have ANC and sound fantastic. So, just pick up a pair of those with the importer while you go at it.
Okay.
But yeah, look, Realme just keeps impressing me. I don't know what it is with those folks. They're just nailing it.
I just love this design. I am so geeked out
so
about
good,
this
right?
design. It is so good. I love it.
I haven't unboxed it yet. Otherwise, I'd be showing you guys on video. I need to actually unbox it because it's not like one of those boxes where I can put it back together. It's like it's got one of those pull tabs that'll break the seal, like Amazon, does on some of the packaging.
Yeah.
So anyway,
very cool.
The last item of news this week it kind of could lead to a good discussion is that Samsung is giving up on Exynos for the next 2 generations of Galaxy flagships and is going to obviously go with, I expect they're going to be going with Qualcomm.
Right.
But they are.
Wasn't there a news story a few weeks back about Samsung negotiating with MediaTek for some?
It could be, and
flagships?
I mean, we love ourselves MediaTek, so maybe that'll happen. But
Dang
the
right.
news here is that they are working on a flagship Galaxy exclusive SoC for 2025, so for 2 generations from now. And that thing will basically have supposedly be able to take on Apple in terms of performance. That's a tall order.
Okay.
Even MediaTek and Qualcomm, I don't feel at the level of performance and power efficiency that Apple brings. And of course, Apple makes it shine by integrating the software as well. And I think that's a big part. But I do believe it's possible for Qualcomm and MediaTek to make drivers for the manufacturers making Android phones using their chips that are going to be close to the level of performance Apple can dish. But so far, that hasn't been the case. They're always lagging a little bit. If you run benchmarks on an iPhone, modern,
always
current,
a little bit behind,
it's always a little better. And so if Samsung is trying to go there, good luck with that. I believe they might be able to. Maybe they hired all the Huawei Kirin engineers because they were doing really well.
I found the news story. It was from early April. And this is just a rumor, so it doesn't really necessarily mean anything. But it says a new media report claims Samsung is considering using MediaTek's chipsets for its upcoming flagships, meaning we could see the Samsung Galaxy S23 have MediaTek at the helm. So, and they're talking about MediaTek doing the Asian models, similar to basically replacing Exynos. Because the US models and the European models will probably still have Qualcomm, but they could go with MediaTek for their Eastern markets, which could be really interesting. Combine that with this story, and it looks like it has a little bit more. It looks like it has some more legs to it.
Yeah, no, I think this is exciting. I think there's some potential here. The Snapdragon chips are good, but MediaTek's Dimensity 9000, 8100 are certainly very competitive right now. So I think that they can only get better from here. And, it's going to be a very competitive space. Apple's still leading the way. I would love to see more competition, but Exynos is not going to bring it to us for whatever reason. That's why I'm a little kind of like scratching my head. I'm like, on one hand, you have Exynos and it's not that good. I mean, it's good, but it's not quite there yet. And now you're talking about a whole new thing for that kind of leapfrogs that. And I'm like, why not build on what you have? Or is it bad? Like, do you have to like dump it? I don't know. It's just bizarre to me that they would do this, What do you like? Does that make sense to you? I don't know.
Well, the Exynos-based Samsung phones have traditionally had trouble keeping up with the Qualcomm-powered equivalents. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that Samsung might be going this way because, frankly, there's a reputational issue there. Like even if the Exynos processors catch up to and even surpass Qualcomm, I think there's going to be a reputational issue there. Like the brand is kind of damaged at this point.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, when you consider that Samsung is also helping Google make the Tensor chips for the Pixel phones, it kind of makes sense that Samsung might want to go off in that direction as well by making its own hardware for its own phones, running its own software. I mean,
but we know what the Tensor is not delivering quite what we want, right? I mean, it supposedly is delivering what Google needs for their image processing, but it's not really delivering what I want. It doesn't feel quite as snappy to me as, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phones I'm using.
Right. So, I mean, so we'll see. I think Samsung had to do something here because the Exynos processors simply weren't keeping up with what the equivalents out there were with Qualcomm and possibly even MediaTek. I don't know if they've ever... So Samsung's never run MediaTek in its hardware, or at least not in its flagship
They have made
hardware.
Phones, not in flagships.
Not
in
flagship
hardware.
Like
lesser phones, yeah.
So it's hard to say like what It's hard to say, like a 1-to-1. It's hard to have a 1-to-1 comparison between MediaTek and Qualcomm. But MediaTek has made some great strides, especially of late, catching up to what Qualcomm's been doing. So I don't think this is necessarily I don't think this is a bad move at all. And if it's Samsung buying some time until it builds its own hardware, I'm all for it. I'm on board.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting.
Especially since I'm in the US and I'll have the Qualcomm versions.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And just so you know, folks, I know that Qualcomm launched a bunch of stuff, chips and stuff. We're going to talk about that next week. Keep that in mind. And then as far as MediaTek, we're also going to have a separate show talking about the 5G chips, the new chips, the Dimensity 1050, for example, which is MediaTek's first chip with a millimeter wave radio. So that's all coming on future episodes. In case you're wondering, why didn't you cover this in the news today? Well, hang tight. I got you covered. Since we nerd out like crazy about chips on the show. No, not really. We mostly nerd out about mobile photography, though.
Right.
Anyway, Adam, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So my day job will, as of June 1st, be as section editor for mobile at XDA Developers. That's a new thing that I'm excited to dive in and hit the ground running, because WWDC is 6 days after that. So that's going to be fun. So you can catch all the, the news and reviews from xda-developers.com. I'm also the co-producer and host of the Benefit of the Doud podcast. So that's Benefit of the D-O-U-D, just like my last name. So go check that out. As far as like me on the internet, you can find me at Dead Technology on the Twitters and on the Instagrams, and go check that out. And you can also check out Benefit of Doud on Twitter. That's the official Twitter handle that I unfortunately underuse. So that's pretty much all me.
Fantastic. And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character without the vowels. Just drop the vowels. And you'll find me on Twitter and on Instagram with that handle, Tankgirl. So I think the best way for us to discuss this with Adam and you folks, the audience, is probably to do it on Twitter. So hit us up there. Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures of cars, all taken, well, mostly taken with phones. And that's kind of a visual complement to the show. Another visual complement is the YouTube channels. There's a couple of them, youtube.com/MobileTech and youtube.com/MobileTech. Please subscribe, like, tell your friends. You know how YouTube works. Click the little notification icon. Comment. You can also comment about the podcast. I'll be happy to respond. But basically, the main channel is all about the phones, the audio, the wearables, and then the second channel is all about the rest, like home stuff, car stuff, travel stuff, all the tech you need that's peripheral to your phone. That's not the three main things. And of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, wherever good podcasts can be found. If you can rate and or review the show on your podcast app, please do. It helps for discovery for other folks, so consider that. And then, of course, there's Patreon, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. If you want to see a video version of this podcast, as I mentioned earlier, you can do that. Basically, this video version comes out a little before, a day or so before. So consider that. And there's other tiers. For example, we were talking about discussing this on Twitter. If you're listening to the audio version, there is also a Discord channel you can join where you can discuss the podcast with me directly. So again, there's a bunch of things you can do there at Patreon that will help support me in doing this podcast. So consider helping me out. Any help is appreciated. If you don't like Patreon, I get it. That's cool. We have another way you can donate, and that's through PayPal. There's a link in the show notes. You can click through. You can buy me a coffee. Yay. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, MediaTek. MediaTek Filogic series of high-performance, power-efficient, and reliable Wi-Fi solutions delivers seamless connectivity for always connected experiences. The Filogic series is ideal for consumer, enterprise, broadband, retail, and IoT applications. MediaTek recently launched its Filogic 880 and 380 chipset, which we just talked about earlier in the show, that will drive the next generation of connectivity with the fastest and most reliable Wi-Fi 7 experiences. Yes, folks, Wi-Fi 7. So Thanks to MediaTek for being our sponsor yet again. And of course, thanks to you, Adam, for being my guest.
Well, thank you for having me. It has been awesome. And by the way, I just bought you a cup of coffee on PayPal. So.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Well, folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that, and we'll hopefully have Adam at some point in the future. But until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.